Every year in May, a special appointment comes to China's coastline. Fishermen untie their cables, nets are hung up on drying racks, and the bustle of the harbor returns to peace. The seasonal fishing moratorium, which has lasted for 30 years, has begun. In the 1990s, overfishing brought China's offshore fishery resources to the brink of depletion, and in 1995, to counter this situation, with the approval of the State Council, China took the lead in implementing a fishing moratorium in the Yellow Sea, Bohai Sea, and the East China Sea, and in 1999 the policy was extended to the South China Sea north of 12 degrees latitude. Internationally, this policy did not come out of nowhere. According to the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, coastal states have the right and obligation to conserve the fishery resources within their jurisdictional waters, and the Fisheries Law of the People's Republic of China, which came into effect in 1986, provides a domestic legal basis for the moratorium with the provision of no fishing zones and no fishing periods. Today, it involves nearly 120,000 fishing vessels across 11 coastal provinces and impacts the livelihoods of millions of fishermen, and has become one of China's most important policies for fishery conservation and management. Is the strict fishing moratorium useful? The data gives the answer. According to relevant research and monitoring data, certain economically important fish populations in the regulated sea areas have shown signs of recovery and growth. The diversity of catch species has increased, unit yields have risen significantly, and the overall trend of resource depletion has been curbed to some extent. Additionally, the enforcement of the fishing moratorium has indirectly driven adjustments in the coastal industrial structure, fostering diversified development pathways such as aquaculture, distant water fisheries, and fishery product processing. It is well known that overfishing for short-term gain only leads to long-term loss. China's summer fishing moratorium was introduced to break this vicious cycle, prevent the overexploitation of fishery resources, and take proactive responsibility for ecological restoration and conservation. The Chinese government aims to take proactive responsibility for ecological restoration and resource conservation by establishing closed fishing seasons and zones, and by regulating fishing gear and methods. This approach reflects not only the governance wisdom of taking with restraint, using with moderation, and ensuring lasting abundance, but also the conscious commitment of a responsible major power. During each annual fishing moratorium, China enforces a stringent policy of round-the-clock control, full area coverage, and all-process supervision, maintaining high pressure on all forms of illegal and non-compliant activities. For example, during the 2024 Special Enforcement Campaign for the Marine Fishing Moratorium, authorities investigated 9,770 violations, referred 1,176 cases for judicial processing, and held 4,139 individuals criminally accountable. Despite the remarkable results, the fishing moratorium has often been questioned. Some neighboring countries continue to express opposition, alleging that China's fishing moratorium serves as an ulterior motive to strengthen its maritime presence and reinforce maritime claims. They have amplified claims that China will use this policy to intensify law enforcement against their fishermen. What's worse, during China's moratorium period, certain countries have ramped up efforts, engaging in indiscriminate fishing and frequently trespassing into China's jurisdictional waters for illegal operations. This not only directly undermines the overall effectiveness of fishery resource conservation and negates China's efforts under the moratorium policy but also objectively escalates frictions and risks in maritime law enforcement and control. In reality, China's summer fishing moratorium system primarily aims to protect the marine ecosystem and fishery resources. Its measures are implemented solely within China's actual jurisdictional waters and do not extend to disputed areas in the Yellow Sea, East China Sea, or South China Sea. The policy is unrelated to maritime claims, and its specific scope does not fully align with China's maritime assertions in these seas. In recent years, China has also begun to conduct its own voluntary fishing moratoriums in the high seas of world oceans. For a long time, this fact has been deliberately distorted by some countries, which, driven by their own interests, indiscriminately oppose China's resource conservation measures and ignore China's calls for other countries to adopt similar fishing bans. In contrast to the opposition and skepticism from some neighboring countries, U.S. criticism of China's summer fishing moratorium and related fishing activities carries strong geopolitical undertones. In recent years, the United States has fitted China's fishery policies into its maritime security narrative, painting them as tools of expansion, threat, and gray zone power. They claim Chinese fishing vessels are overburdening global marine resources. They label China's moratorium as a unilateral political act that violates international law. Simultaneously, the U.S. actively issues statements supporting the Philippines' challenges against China's moratorium policy. Leveraging maritime and fishing issues has long been a key instrument and diplomatic tool for the United States to advance its own economic, political, and security interests in the Asia-Pacific region. More significantly, it serves as a critical lever and pretext to suppress and contain China and to interfere in South China Sea disputes. In contrast to China's fishing moratorium protection policy, which has been consistently upheld and implemented for over 3 decades, the recent presidential executive order issued by the U.S. relaxing restrictions on American fishing operations has repeatedly raised concerns in the international community. It is ironic that such a country is now accusing China's fishing moratorium of being inconsistent with international law. Such double standards only expose its true intentions and fail to win the trust of others. The seasonal fishing ban is fundamentally a bold, self-imposed reform, far from easy to implement. For countless Chinese fishermen who depend on the sea for their livelihood, it means a sharp drop in income and disrupted livelihoods, with sacrifices and costs that cannot be understated. Even more challenging is the fact that this commitment often faces misinterpretation, criticism, and even politically motivated smear campaigns from the outside world. Nevertheless, for 3 decades, China has never wavered or retreated from its resolve to uphold the fishing ban policy. On the contrary, China has adopted a more open and responsible stance, positioning itself at the forefront of global marine governance. In 2023, China formally accepted the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement Protocol, and in 2025, it became a full party to the Port State Measures Agreement. By responding to doubts with institutional measures and fulfilling commitments through action, China is not a bystander but a steadfast actor in the blue governance critical to the future. However, it must be emphasized that in today's context of increasingly depleted global marine resources, no single country's fishing moratorium alone can reverse the broader ecological trend. Especially when one nation enforces restrictions while others continue unchecked, exploitative fishing, the tragedy of the commons becomes all but inevitable. Therefore, to achieve the sustainable development of marine fishery resources, it ultimately depends on the coordination, cooperation, and joint efforts of countries in the region. Especially at a time when global fishery resources are facing decline, countries should return to the original intent of fishery governance at the institutional level. Relevant nations should work alongside China to jointly promote the sustainable development of fishery resources and advance the institutionalized operation of marine environmental protection. While the global fisheries industry is still struggling with the dilemma of fishing and depletion, China's continuous protection reminds the world that the oceans have never been anyone's private property, but a community of destiny that needs to be cared for together. In the next 30 years, we hope more marine conservation measures could be done, so that the sound of the fish can be heard in every part of the ocean.